Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Behind the Clipboard, How to Be Successful in Your GFSI Audits from an Auditor's Point of View. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you find our presentation and the discussion to be informative and helpful to you. Before we get started, we would like to say a quick but sincere thank you to everyone that's joining us today from the food industry. We recognize that you always work very hard to provide everyone with safe food, and that has thankfully continued throughout the current crisis we're going through. So on behalf of so many people, thank you for all that you do for us. My name is Kim Knoll, and I work for Bureau Veritas within the Food Safety Certification Division. I'll be hosting the webinar today. And for those of you who may not be familiar with our company, our mission is to help our clients operate safely, grow their business, and protect their brands. Bureau Veritas is quite a large organization. We are financially strong with a growing global presence. Bureau Veritas is known as a TIC or TIC company, which stands for Testing, Inspection, and Certification. We are a global leader within this sector. All of the speakers participating in our webinar today are from our North American Food Safety Certification team. Globally, we are an accredited certification body for many other standards. However, here in North America, we primarily assist sites with certification to BRC Global Standards, SQF, FSSC 22000, FAMI-QS, and Safe Feed, Safe Food. We also do a number of GMP type audits as well as several second party program audits. If you would like to receive more information about our services, you're certainly welcome to reach out to me. I'll be happy to assist. You can also check out either of our websites and get some more information there. And you can also submit an inquiry and somebody will follow up with you shortly. Okay, we have 3 speakers on our panel today who I'm very happy to introduce to everyone. Jim White is an independent food safety consultant and SQF auditor. He has over 40 years experience working in the food industry, and he has been auditing for more than 6 years. Jim was recognized in 2016 as a finalist for the SQFI Auditor of the Year Award. So we're very lucky to have him to be a part of our team and to have him conduct audits for a number of our customers. John Paul, who you'll hear us refer to as JP, works for Bureau Veritas as an SQF auditor, and he is also part of our technical team. He is our certification specialist. JP has over 17 years experience in the food industry, and he has been auditing or conducting GFSI audits for more than 5 years. Chris Middleton actually heads up our North American Food Safety Certification team, and he is our food program manager for North America. Chris is an auditor for BRC Global Standards, SQF, FAMI-QS, and Safe Feed, Safe Food, and others. Chris has over 15 years experience conducting a variety of different food safety assessments. So Jim, JP, and Chris make up our panel today, and they will be sharing their thoughts with us shortly. But first, we would like to share some audit data with you before we move into the discussion. We have data on what are the most common nonconformances from both BRCGS and SQF. Once we review the information, we will then be able to hear from the auditors to hear their input and comments. Next, we have a few frequently asked questions that we'd like to use this opportunity to discuss with everyone. And then our panelists will have a few minutes just to share some closing comments and words of wisdom, whatever message they wish to share that they feel might help prepare everyone as much as possible for any future audits. Then we'll take time to answer questions that are submitted by the audience that are submitted during this webinar. Okay, we have the top nonconformances from BRC. These are from the audits to the Global Standard for Food Safety. The data is from over 4,000 audits that were conducted February 1st, 2019 up until recently. This data does include global audit results. It is not limited to only audits from North America. And we do have the top 10 most common findings to show you. On the far left, you can see the ranking, number one being the most common, and we have it as senior management commitment. More specifically, the need to define and maintain a clear plan for the development and continuous improvement of the food safety and food quality culture. Number two is regarding the HACCP plan or the food safety plan. More specifically, the hazard analysis. The third most common nonconformance is general housekeeping for the plant and the equipment. Number four is regarding designated changing facilities for personnel. And number five is inadequate access to be able to inspect the ceiling or roof voids for pest activity. The sixth most common nonconformance is also from the requirements for senior management commitment, and it is regarding the need for a confidential reporting system for staff. Number seven is facility walls, their maintenance, and the ability to be cleaned properly. Number eight is regarding internal audit requirements, the need for a scheduled program, a defined scope, and a defined frequency. Number nine is traceability, the need for proper ID of all raw materials, all work in progress, and all finished product. And number 10 is from the chemical and physical product contamination control section, specifically the requirement for procedures regarding the handling of glass and other brittle materials. Okay, now we have the top 10 nonconformances from SQF certified sites. This data is from audits that were conducted in 2019 to the Food Safety Code for manufacturing. It does include audits that were conducted to Edition 8 as well as 8.1. And again, this is global results. The most common SQF nonconformance was regarding equipment and utensils, their design, construction, installation, and maintenance in order to meet regulatory requirements and to not pose a contamination risk. The second most common finding was regarding the food defense plan, specifically its need to be reviewed and challenged at least annually. Number three, cleaning and sanitation. SSOPs need to include cleaning methods and who is responsible for the cleaning of the equipment, environment, storage areas, staff amenities, toilet facilities, and all must be documented and implemented. Number four is from Module 11, personnel practices. Those practices regarding the storage, handling, preparation, and processing operations. And the fifth most common nonconformance is from Module 2, from the HACCP or Food Safety Plan, and it is specific to the flow diagrams. Okay, nonconformance numbers 6, 7, and 8 are all regarding the physical building itself. Number 6 are walls, partitions, ceilings, and doors, what those items are constructed from, and the ability to maintain those surfaces as clean. Number 7 is the requirement for external openings. They need to be closed properly and sealed in order to prevent pest activity. Number 8 are the floors, which must be constructed properly, graded, drained, impervious to liquid, and they must be cleanable. Number 9 is from Module 2, the document control and records section. Records must be legible and authorized by those performing monitoring activities to demonstrate that the activity has been completed. And number 10 is from Module 11, temporary repairs. Temporary repairs shall not pose a food safety risk. They must be included in the cleaning program, and there must be a plan in place to address their completion so they don't become permanent fixtures in the site. Okay, so if we look at all those non-conformances and try to organize them a bit, we can place them into 5 main categories or buckets, and those would be senior management commitment, HACCP, prerequisite programs, the facility itself, and the food safety management system at the site. So we can now look at each of these categories individually and hear some insight from the auditors on um, how they feel these might be able to be prevented within your plants, and hopefully then also will be able to help prevent them from becoming findings in your upcoming audits. Okay, the first group or category is senior management commitment. This was specific only to BRCGS. So it makes sense to start with Chris, who is our qualified BRCGS auditor. Chris, we saw two common findings regarding senior management commitment. One was regarding the food safety culture and the other a confidential reporting system. So can you tell us more about what may be lacking with regards to meeting the intent of the standard for management commitment?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Just to kind of clarify, this data obviously for BRCGS is for BRCGS food, which is usually out ahead of some of the other standards. And part of the challenge within these two areas was it was really new to the GFSI landscape. It was really a talking point for a long time, food safety culture being there. But there were some items that needed to be put in place, and sites weren't really sure how to get things implemented as it came along to food safety culture. So really defining a plan, because it is difficult to measure culture on that front, and the standard does talk about that a little bit. So there needed to be looking at things of how are they determining that their food safety culture was effective, how are they going to assess it, what activities are going to be done. BRCGS has done a really good job at setting up a webinar that talks about this specific item that's available on YouTube and goes through the expectations on that front. Needing to see, really demonstrate and have a documented program about how employees are empowered to make decisions. Do they know what good looks like? And are they able to do the right thing when nobody is looking? The difficult part, and that's going to start coming into the second year when issue 8 rolled out, was the measurement of that and the implementation of these programs. Have they done the activities? Do they have their action plan in place with measurable targets, with timescales that are attached to it? So that was really the challenge on that end, and understanding the culture that's in the site. Some of the sites that I know I ran into had some difficulties kind of saying, well, everybody does what they're supposed to do. We already have that in place. And that is not really what the standard was looking for on that end. The second bullet point that is on here about confidential reporting system is pretty straightforward. I think it got overlooked potentially. This is a bit of a challenge, I think, for smaller sites to figure out what they need to do. Again, BRCGS does have some ability to help out on those sides with those things, so it's recommended to kind of see the resources they have there. But the more and more that it evolved, the more you saw that food safety and food quality reporting did get built into some of those whistleblower phone numbers and whatnot that's in place.
Great, thank you. JP, senior management commitment is an important element for the SQF standard as well. Would you like to share any insight regarding or talk a little bit as to what is the intent of the code when it comes to senior management commitment for the SQF sites on the line?
Yeah. So the intent of this section is to ensure that resources are available to the staff and management, and that management is committed to the performance of the food safety system. That's the intent, that the resources are there and that management has committed to that. Now, there are requirements for adequate resources like reporting structure, training, maintaining integrity and operation of the food safety system. However, that's the big thing when it comes to auditors is you have this section that you just can't evaluate in 20 minutes or 15 minutes when you're doing your audit. This is a section that a lot of auditors, when they look at, it has to be determined over the course of the entire audit whether a company meets the intent of senior management commitment. Have they provided the resources? Have they done everything that they can to ensure food safety integrity of their system to make sure they're producing a safe product? Now, typically in my past, when it comes to any kind of non-conformances, usually it's It's not something you find in like 5 minutes, but it's the total package throughout the whole audit. And typically after like 80% of the audit is complete, usually as an auditor, you probably know if there's an issue there, because it won't be just one item that pops up in all the elements in this section. It'll be several, and it'll be something that the auditor can definitely provide. So anyway, that's my take on it. That's how I see it. So I'll hand it back over to Kim.
Thanks, JP. Jim, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, and I'm going to look at it as I'm an old-time operations guy. And back, 30 years ago, I was protected by layers of management. Now, Global Food Standard, they're requiring that senior management be involved in these audits and be involved in doing the management reviews and taking ownership of their plants. So I look at management commitment from the time I walk in until the time I leave. If I walk in and I'm going to do an audit and the practitioner says, well, I'm going to be alone with you for 3 days, I know it could be a long audit because I'm going to start questioning management commitment. Again, as an operations guy, I would be expecting to see the senior management team in and out of that audit, if not in it all the time, for sure on facility tours, and supporting the practitioner throughout this audit. And as I go through the audit, when I, especially in an internal auditing and in management review, if we determine that, oh, it's the practitioner's job, it's quality job to do the internal audit, or it's, I just sign off on the documentation. Again, it's hard to measure, but if I see that senior managers not being involved in this audit, they may get a minor in management commitment, and that's a hard one to pull. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. Chris, did you have any closing comments from the SQF side?
I think that the SQF is going to be evolving. We're going to see food safety culture fold into Edition 9 most likely as it moves forward, seeing that GFSI did take a position on food safety culture. I would say looking at things along the lines of leadership versus management is really important, top-down kind of thing. But also, I would recommend a lot of sites thinking about a plan, do, check, act cycle kind of all the time, and continuous improvement and evolution of the program. It doesn't have to be just set to one standard, but start thinking about things of how do we reward our employees for being committed to that food safety side and driving it forward. Are we empowering all those people within the positions, or do we have a very rigid structure that may make people that are concerned about bringing forward concerns as it relates to food safety or food quality, regardless if it's SQF, BRC, or FSSC 22000 or any of the other standards? So I think it's really important that senior leadership and senior management is continually involved, as Jim was talking about, and they're not just there to sit at a meeting for a couple hours. So I do think dedicating time and ensuring that management review is really detailed and looking at how can we evolve the food safety quality management system at a site is extremely important, and ensuring that you're monitoring any objectives that you have set forth to demonstrate compliance to the requirements within either whatever standard that you're using, but also that the facility's FSMS and QMS is continually evolving.
Great. Okay. All right. Sorry, having trouble advancing my screen here. Okay, our second group of non-conformances are in regards to the HACCP, or Food Safety Program. BRC GS data showed that there were issues with the hazard analysis, and SQF noted some challenges with the flow diagrams. So Chris, how should sites' hazard analysis be completed in order to better meet the intent of the standard?
So all the standards for the most part are based off Codex Alimentarius HACCP. So remembering those 5 preliminary steps and 7 principles is really important. But one of the challenges I see when it comes to hazard analyses, regardless if it's SQF, BRC, or FSSC 22000, is sometimes they're extremely general. So they might make a statement like, in biological, they're worried about pathogens. Well, what specific pathogens are we concerned with? Or they might state, we're worried about mycotoxins. Well, which ones? Is it aflatoxin that we're worried about? Because they're all different depending on potentially the species or the product that you're dealing with within there, and the control measures are different as well. So it's really important that we get as detailed as possible, and also ensuring that the hazard analysis, we are looking at the flow of the product, the process steps that are within there, and we should be looking at the raw materials, packaging materials, processing aids, all that could potentially pose a risk to the products that are manufactured at the site. So ensuring that all of those items are captured in the hazard analysis is extremely important, and ensuring that you're as detailed as possible when it comes to those hazards that are there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jim, how should sites' flowcharts be completed in order to better meet the intent of the SQF standard?
And this ties into just what Chris was talking about. A lot of the issues with the hazard analysis is due to the process flow charts not being filled out completely. And the biggest mistake is not the whole team, the technical team, the production people, the engineering people, they don't all get involved in doing the process flow. They leave it up to the quality person or the practitioner. So the first mistake, and what would help everyone, is if everyone over 3 shifts, the entire operation gets involved in reviewing the process flow to make sure we've got all the screens and the covers and everything and the right conveyors in place. Make sure all the inputs are in. You know, how many times do we don't see compressed air or any flushing included on the process flow, and make sure the waste and the reworks all included, just as the code spells it out. Again, get the whole team involved. That will make the process flowchart more complete.
Very good. JP, did that about sum it up, or did you have any additional thoughts to share?
Well, I know the intent of the code is to list all the inputs and outputs. And my biggest thing is I usually find the biggest issues when it comes to service inputs, and that's usually water, compressed air, steam, and gases. Just like Jim was mentioning before, steam, gases, water, these are simple inputs into the system. And it's really easy when you know a system, and I think for the quality management at a facility, to overlook a few things like a water flush or a water push during change outs of sauces and tanks, or even some other inputs out there, like if you're using like a gas flushed packaging system and you forget about some bottled gas that you've got tied into the system to kind of push out the oxygen in packages. All these kind of add up, but really I think what it comes down to is if you can have more people walk your flow diagram during an audit or before an audit, like just more than one person one time a year, if you can have it done several times a year by several different groups that help support your food safety program at the site, I think a lot of these little issues during the audit could be taken care of well before you get to that stage and before the auditor comes in and looks and finds it. So thank you.
Very good. Okay, we can move on to the next group here. Oh, sorry. Okay, the next group of findings can all be considered as from the prerequisite programs. There were quite a few of the most common findings that kind of fell into this category or group. Chris, what can sites do to improve these specific programs?
Well, I think that the main issues we generally see within the general housekeeping side, regardless of it being BRCGS, FSSC 22000, SQFI, or SQF audits, is just some lack of detail within some areas. So these are areas where you want to protect yourself. You want to be looking at risk, obviously, to the products, but making sure that are your cleaning schedules, are they scheduled at appropriate frequencies? So are you self-monitoring yourself to ensure that areas are kept clean and free of any potential contaminants that could pose a risk within your system? Glass and brittle plastic procedures or odds, I'm finding challenges within sites to ensure that everything is accounted for. So loose items, keep an eye on these loose items, calculators that are within areas that move around. If you have computer mice and keyboards, those are extremely important to account for that are within exposed product handling areas. So I think those are some challenges that we see when we're doing audits, ensuring that you're doing your inspections for both of these items at an appropriate frequency. I know the industry standard tends to be general housekeeping or GMP audits are done once a month. Do we need to increase that potentially in some of the higher risk areas? And when I mean high risk, I mean exposed product handling areas, not stored warehouse areas or maintenance areas. But do you need to adjust those frequencies that we are inspecting and verifying those areas that could pose risks to products a little bit more frequently than just once a month because of the risk associated with them? Same with glass and brittle plastics. Do we need to start doing it in areas where we have a higher risk that it could occur? I see sometimes people stick to where it says it has to be annual. They do it once a year. And those are generally the sites that end up having items that are missing or broken items that are within there. Ensuring that you know if something is broken or has a crack in it, knowing where it's at. So did it get replaced? Did it get worse? Accounting for those items within those areas is what I would say sites need to be looking at a little bit more. Removing the cookie cutter and taking our mind out of what was the industry standard for a number of years and focusing on what is best for your site is really important on these items.
Okay. Jim, would you like to share any insight here?
Yeah, and my comments are going to apply to the top non-conformant for the PRPs and for the facility. But again, so the key is, as far as writing the code, you'll always hear me in my consulting world talk about I audit in bullet points, you read in paragraphs. So make sure you read the code and get all the line items of the code so you make sure your program is accurate and covers all those things. Don't have giveaway points because you didn't read the code in detail. And then the other, you need to, senior management and operations guys need to get on the floor and look at their plant and do their walkthroughs. And, I don't buy well, you're a different set of eyes. We walk by it every day. You need to train your team. You need to train the supervisors. You need to train senior management. Don't walk by this stuff. You walk, as you say, I walk by it every day. Well, start reacting to it when you walk by. Again, we're not going to buy you're a different set of eyes, you're different. Thanks.
Okay. JP, any comments regarding the PRPs?
Well, when it comes to PRPs, I know on the SQF side, it starts out with sanitation, and sanitation is always, an interesting area to look at. I know for improvements for sanitation, they always include cleaning practices on the floor. Some of the examples that come to mind would be typically doing audits. At some point throughout the audits, sanitation people, one of the bad practices they have is leaving parts, clean parts on the floor or on elevated walk platforms. Walk platforms where they come up anywhere between 2 to 6, 7 feet are just ideal, especially on step ladder platforms or the green grading. It seems like parts are constantly left there, so it's always kind of monitoring during sanitation the practices that the employees are employing once they have the parts clean, where are they storing them. Another thing when it comes to sanitation is the thoroughness of cleaning parts. Sometimes it comes into, if you've got a large assembly of something that can't be broke down and it takes a lot of manual labor to get in there and clean things, it could be hard on some new sanitation employees. Maybe they don't have the experience in cleaning some assemblies on grinding or some packaging equipment. and they just don't have that experience to get in there and know where all those little niches are, to get all that debris out, to make sure it's going to be clean, that it can be as clean as it can for all the chemicals and things that get applied to give it the best effect it can have. Now, as far as personnel and GMP practices on the floor, I'll tell you right now, when it comes to GMPs, I love to stand in an audit and just watch for 15 or 20 minutes and just watch people out on the floor doing what they do best and just making great food products. However, standing on the floor for 20 minutes just watching, you come across a lot of good things, but it also depends on the time you stand on the floor and watch people. I personally like to stand on the floor and watch at startups and at changeovers, because really the everyday scenario, people know what's going on and they know what they're doing. When it comes to changeovers or startups, that's where you do it one time a day and that's it. And that's the time where it really comes into focus on GMP practices. Are people really in the back of their mind keeping GMPs to the forefront? Like, I'm wearing my gloves when I touch the equipment that's going to touch the product. Am I not leaving things where they shouldn't be? Am I keeping them in a sanitary condition at the point where I'm putting things together or taking things apart or changing over? Those are always the points I try to take a look at, is like cross-contamination, how products are stored, gloves, especially the condition of gloves, because you can really notice from a distance if they've got ripped or torn gloves or if they've changed them or not. It makes it really good. Now, the last one, like temporary repairs, I'm looking for temporary repairs when it comes to audits in very close proximity to food contact surfaces or food handling surfaces, like packaging equipment, like enclosed boxes, things like this, where there's a lot of little compressed air lines or electrical lines, things like this that help automate the food manufacturing environment. These areas, I really start to look and focus in on any kind of temporary repairs. That would be tape. It could be wire. A lot of times wire is used to just get something just perfect enough. However, that can cause a food safety event to occur. Or sometimes you may even see other pieces of equipment used as temporary repairs. Like they'll use a clamp to hold something together on a piece of equipment that's not meant to hold it. So these are the areas I kind of focus on during the audit to kind of look at stuff. So thank you.
Thanks, JP. Okay, we can move on to the fourth category. The next group of findings are all related to the physical building itself. Again, there were quite a few of the most common nonconformances that fell into this category. So Chris, how can sites avoid these facility-related nonconformances?
Well, I think going back to ensuring your inspections and self-monitoring is extremely important within here, and I think both JP and Jim have both touched on this in a way. The staff changing facilities, I find, and I'm not sure where Jim and JP are at this, sometimes this gets overlooked. I find piles of uniforms in corners, or restrooms aren't very well maintained. Break rooms aren't very sanitary, especially under sinks and things along those lines. So making sure that those are well equipped. Access to ceiling voids. Both of the standards do talk about drop ceilings or false ceilings. Making sure that the facility can get up there, or have they even gotten up there to inspect those areas, because those are nice harborage areas for pests and whatnot. Walls are damaged. Again, are they fabricated of appropriate materials is really important that we want to look at there. Can they withstand a repeated washing if they need it? Do they withstand some beating that they get sometimes that occurs because pallets might get pushed against them and things like that if there's a small space? So looking at those kind of things is quite important. Equipment and utensils on the SQF side. What I find challenging with some of these sites is they're sometimes unaware of the conditions of all their materials, and are they appropriately constructed. So sometimes the path to hell is paved with good intentions is sort of what they say. But I see stainless steel shovels used sometimes, and they get absolutely beaten up and they start to split and they bend and they crack because it's just a very, very hard process that they're using. So ensuring that the utensils and the equipment that is being used is fit for purpose is extremely important. And as JP talked about, and I think it's really important, I want to pull this in here, is you're internally standing back to look at these things for a while. I've found looking at the internal audit processes, especially when it comes to these items, these things sometimes get overlooked. It's a lot of times because sites are just zipping through things because they see it all the time. They don't stand back and watch how equipment is being used or utensils are being used. They don't actually go in and take a thorough inspection or look in the staff break rooms or the changing areas and things like that. So it's really important that you self-police, you self-monitor yourself on that front, and you're monitoring those things. So that's where I kind of stand on it.
Okay, JP, do you have any comments on these facility-related nonconformances?
Yeah, when it comes to some of these items, like for example, like equipment, utensils, wall flooring, ceilings, doors, external openings. A lot of this stuff, like external openings, walls, ceilings, doors, things like that, I think a lot more could be done with the facility if there was a more robust inspection plan for these. And it could be accommodated through the internal audit. It could be your monthly facility walkthrough, however companies want to do it. But when it comes to external openings, typically when I find a company while doing an audit that only does like maybe a facility inspection once every quarter or once every 6 months, or they're looking at the doors and the walls and the ceilings on a frequency that's longer than 1 month to 3 months, like they're doing it every 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, or once a year, because some parts of the code in SQF mention yearly, then there's a lot of opportunities for me just looking at these programs before I go walking around. I probably already have a mindset like they're not looking at it as often as they should, and there's going to be some issues when we go on the walk around in the facility to look at the general condition of everything. And I think if companies had more insight to do more of these inspection programs more often, I think they would find a lot of these like little openings in the outside of buildings, like, you know, like something hit the building, there's a hole there, needs to be sealed up, especially like around dock plates and dock doors. These are, they're just always, they take a lot of abuse. They're made heavily with heavy gauge steel, but you know, in the end, do you have an opening there where something could get in? Like whether it's an insect, a rodent, something that can get in. That's what we're wanting to prevent. And if you do a more often or a more frequent inspection, I think a lot of these things could be reported back to the maintenance department or people that are responsible for getting these things fixed and could get them tidied up before the auditor comes walking through. Now, my favorite item is utensils in a facility. Oh my goodness. I get goosebumps just talking about this one. People are so ingenious in facilities. They can come up with such amazing utensils to accommodate a job that is like 1 in a million type of jobs in America. And they'll come up with this special thing, and they'll have this tool that can do this one special job. And it's just crazy just how imaginative people get. However, on the flip side, they have probably, and most usually, have used the wrong type of material to accommodate this one job. Like, for example, using a sanitary wipe container cut down into a certain part to actually work as a scoop, or a piece of stainless that has been bent, cracked, it's got harborage areas, it's got little nooks in it, and they're using it for this one special type of work in a facility. If for some reason these utensils could be observed by the management group to understand their culture and what their employees want to be done to make it easier for them, then hopefully the management group could identify that and source the correct food safety type of tools to do the job. And that would eliminate a lot of non-conformances when walking through, like, hey, why are you using that? Well, unfortunately, that's a great use of that tool, but unfortunately, the materials that it's made with, or where it came from, or any one of a million scenarios, it just doesn't fit the intent of the code to use something that's not safe for food safety. So that's what I got. Thanks, Kim.
Sure, absolutely. Jim, any final comments on facility nonconformity?
Well, again, I talked about being on the floor in the above section, and JP and Chris have covered this pretty well. My suggestion would be to look up, right? Go out in the plant, look up, and that'll help you walking through the facility.
Okay, great advice. Okay, the final category is regarding the food safety management system. And that included nonconformances related to the internal audits, traceability, food defense, and record keeping. So Chris, what do you wish sites knew with regards to these programs?
I think it's important that the sites understand how key internal audits are to them, and it's not just an activity that they're doing because BRCGS or SQF is asking them to do this. So I mentioned earlier in an earlier response about plan, do, check, act cycle and self-monitoring. You need to be looking at these things as you're going through. A lot of sites, I see a challenge is they rush to do their internal audit a week before their certification audit. That's not the intent behind these things. It's to self-monitor. BRCGS does have a standard that there's supposed to be 4 activities done throughout the year, so it's key. It's a bit different from how some of the other standards call that out, but you need to make sure we're doing a full system evaluation as we're looking at that. I would always strongly recommend that we're looking at challenging the system as thoroughly as possible. I'm finding gaps within internal audits, and I don't know if Jim and JP will agree with this, on supporting evidence to show that it's in there. BRCGS does talk about that there needs to be comments about conformance and non-conformance within there. So ensuring that it's there. We do talk about traceability as well, and this is where mass balance can be tricky. So looking at things, how are we doing that? And is the facility challenging themselves enough on that end? Sometimes we're not getting enough of those mass balance exercises as we might need sometimes, or we're not accounting for everything that is required within the audit or within their own activity and justifying for that. So that's kind of where it is on that front for me.
Jim, is there anything that you wish sites knew with regards to any of these programs?
Well, again, internal auditing and food defense, and I'll be quick. Internal auditing, I will challenge if I'm doing an audit and the company receives minors during the audit, I will say, let's go back and look in your internal audit. How'd you guys miss that? Do you have the wrong tool? Did you not take the time to do the internal audit? If you don't have a good internal audit program and you're not hard on yourself, you will not do well in the audit.
Okay, thanks. It really sounds like that internal audit's pretty key. JP, do you have any closing thoughts regarding these programs?
Well, I know when it comes to food defense, that kind of picks my eye up right there. And food defense, I just got to say, is more than just checking doors and gates, right? I wish facilities put more into their facility assessment for the facility for the SQF requirements. I know SQF requires a challenge every year for food defense, but I think some companies they just try to meet the minimums, and I think a lot of great things have come from companies that go above and beyond that challenge. They really do challenge and think of new challenges every year that really test all the elements of their food defense program, other than doors and gates, other than security guards, but also checking internally too, because food defense program is not only based on the physical structure of the site, but also identifying those bad behaviors within a manufacturing environment. And when it comes to food defense, if the challenge works good for the SQF requirements and it does what it's supposed to do, then the next big part is taking those flaws that get identified and those things that could be improved on and the results of that food defense challenge, and just making them drive into a better food defense program for the next year. Like if something failed, a lot of companies, they're very shy when I come in to do the audit to explain to me, they're always happy to tell me what good things happen. They are very reluctant to tell me what bad things happen. And I usually have to tell people, like, look, if bad things happen in your food defense challenge, that just is more information to drive better improvement for next year. And a lot of companies that I've gone to on the second year, when they've done that, they've improved their food defense really well in ways that I never really thought they were going to go to. So I think when it comes to food defense, if companies put a great effort into that challenge and get creative and really push the boundaries of what food defense is and what the elements are, I think they'll get a lot of good feedback. That feedback will come, and if they can handle it in a great way, they can really improve the food defense program at their site and really improve it for the better, not only for the facility, but for all the employees working there as well. So yeah.
Very good. Okay, before we move on to being able to answer questions from the audience, we have just a few frequently asked questions that we'd like to quickly address for everyone. Okay, Jim, I'll let you answer this common question. How many weeks or months worth of data is needed prior to that initial audit for SQF?
Well, the rule of thumb everybody talks about, you'll hear everybody say, I got to have 3 months. The more important key, the bigger factor is before your initial audit, you've got to have all these things that's required to be done, like the mock recall, the internal audit, the business continuity, the validation exercises. You can't say the management review. You can't say, well, when you get to the initial audit, well, it says annually we're going to do it at some point. So as important as having records and having started the program, you need to have all these processes done before the initial audit, and they should be called out to you in your desk audit. Thanks.
Very good. Okay, Chris, inspection approach versus systematic approach. Can you talk a little bit as to what are the differences and when might each be appropriate?
Well, since we're getting close to the tail end here, I'll kind of make this as succinct as possible. As I like to say, what we're looking for, we do state that these standards are food safety management systems, which is how items interact with each other. They are not checklist audits. So what I tend to see as a challenge at points within food safety management systems is people try to compartmentalize every single function versus seeing can things interact with each other to make it a little bit easier. And that's how I know I audit and I approach my audits. I don't sit down and go, okay, 2.1.1.1, tick, 2.1.1.2, tick, and when I do SQF audits, or that way with BRC or even FSSC. I try to see how the system as a whole is interacting, and I strongly suggest that sites start to audit themselves that way as well. That's really important, moving away from those checklist audits to looking at a system audit function, and is everything interacting the way that it needs to.
Okay, great. Okay, JP, any advice or guidance how to handle a situation if you don't agree with the auditor or the finding that's come up?
All right. Well, I think you gave me a good question here, Kim. Okay, so first off, when it comes to how to handle a situation if you don't agree with the auditor or finding, first off, you gotta stay professional. That's the biggest thing. I know a lot of people at plants, they take a lot of their programs personally, and a lot of auditors, they take a lot of things personally, but the ground rule is you gotta stay professional. You gotta stay level-headed. It's not personal. It's about the system and what the auditor has noted as a potential degree of nonconformance within the system. So when it comes to that, obviously, we're talking about the situation where an auditor is at a facility, he sees an issue, the plant provides the information to what to look at. The auditor, notes that this doesn't meet the code, and you go from there. Now, I think it's best if the auditor states the nonconformance right at the time to the main contact to the group, and lets them know what the nonconformance is. I think it's also good that an auditor should be able to relate them to what aspect, element in the SQF code or what code they're auditing. Like, hey, here's the nonconformance. It relates to this in the code. And that just gives the site more information on where it is and help identify it. When it comes back to the site, now, at the moment the nonconformance has been communicated, I think at that moment it's fair to say you can talk about the nonconformance, you can talk about the program, because it's all part of the audit. You talk about the good stuff, you talk about the nonconformance as well, and the auditor should be able to allow the site to at least understand the nonconformance, maybe even take some time to review it again with the auditor. But at that point, after you spent additional 5 or so minutes, the audit does need to proceed on. But once the audit proceeds on, I think it's very appropriate that if the plant went back and thought about it and wanted to talk about it one more time at the end of the day or before the closing meeting, just in case there was information missed by the facility or documents or records that were missed that weren't seen. I think it's always a good point to for any auditor to allow at least one more kind of review session. It doesn't have to be long, but the audits do have to continue on time. But if there is time in the audit and you've got an extra 5 minutes, then it's definitely appropriate to come back and take a look at it while you're there and see what the facility or the management group has for it, and see if it's justified, if the NC is still valid, or if the facility is able to come back with more information to overturn the observation made by the auditor. Now, I do have to admit, as a little tidbit for everybody, or a little tip, if for some reason you're having a good discussion with an auditor and the auditor decides to take back the nonconformance, I think a lot of plants on my second and third year through come back, and if they don't turn it up or turn it in, then they have to take care of it. Then they kind of lose that, and they lose it as an opportunity for improvement rather than justifying why it wasn't a nonconformance. And then in the following year, the later years, they end up with another nonconformance in the same section. So that's what I got. Thanks, Kim.
Sure. Oh, great. Jim, any thoughts or advice, anything that the site can do to help things go a little quicker, a little smoother?
Understand the code, be organized, have your team ready to be involved, to get any information and do the homework during the audit.
Okay, thanks. Okay, other than the actual audit clauses, Chris, is there anything else that the site may need to know? Anything else to be aware of?
I think understanding, depending on the standard that you're looking at, knowing how the whole standard functions. So SQF is part A, making sure that you understand the components within there. You should be working hand in hand with your certification body to understand those, but you need to make sure that you're not just being audited against, in the SQF cases, the system elements and the applicable module that you're being audited to. Understand how the entire standard works is extremely important on that front.
Great. Okay, we don't have much time, but if anyone would like to share any final tips or closing comments, that would be great. Jim, is there any final advice you'd like to share before we move on to the Q&A session?
Not particularly, just again, internal audit, internal audit, internal audit.
Very good. JP, any final thoughts from you?
I gotta echo the same thing that Jim said. Internal audit. That's definitely key for me.
Okay, Chris?
Two things. So I would ensure that you are looking at the audit standard that matches best for the site. Don't try and jam a square peg into a round hole or vice versa. So ensure that you're looking at it on that front. The other thing that I would say is ensure that expectations of the audit are effectively communicated at that opening meeting. So I think JP was touching on how to handle non-conformances in those situations. It should be clear what we will do in the event we have a disagreement, because it does occur among friends. So ensuring that that is covered at the start, setting the ground rules, and you'll be set up for success within that audit. And try to learn. It's a value-added audit. And realize we're not here to be difficult. Jim, myself, JP, all of the BVC and A auditors, we are all looking for conformance. Be able to demonstrate and articulate and provide evidence to demonstrate conformance. That's what we're looking for.
Okay, great. Thank you guys very much. Okay, everyone, I do apologize. We are almost out of time. However, we would definitely follow up with all questions after the presentation today. We really only have time for about 3 questions. And yes, we will share copies of the slides, and we will have a link available to the recorded presentation. Okay, Chris, how should we prepare for employee interviews? It seems that audits are always a quiz show on acronyms. Are cheat sheets allowed to be provided to employees?
Hey, Kim. Yeah, I think that's a good question. And really, that needs to be pushed into the internal audit program that you guys are following. Don't be scared to include people from other departments that people aren't familiar with to do those interviews, to create that sense of unfamiliarity that exists, and ensure that the interview process is covered in the opening meeting. I already stated that in one of my comments, but the expectation of those interviews should be covered and brought up and clarified so that you know what needs to be done.
Great. Okay, Jim, here's a good one for you. As an auditor, how are consultants handled during the audit?
Well, hopefully you've picked a good consultant to be with you, but the key is to make sure that you are not so dependent on the consultant that you as an SQF practitioner or management team can't answer the questions. The consultant can be there. He's there to support you. But you as a practitioner have to lead the responses from your team.
Okay, great. JP, let's see, what ways are there to challenge your food defense program? Can you provide a few specific examples?
When it comes to examples for food defense, I think using like an external person, someone completely separate of the site and operational management group, to come in and kind of challenge a system is always good. I know there's a comment in there about what other ways you can challenge the food defense plan, and if we don't mind to name a few from Colleen. So an external person challenging the system from an external perspective, or even having a person inside the facility going around and doing some suspicious things to see if your employees are aware of it and would challenge that person is always a good one. And then also any types of scenarios that you can include in this. I've visited some companies over the past 2, 3, 4 years. Some people think about this like 12 months in advance. How can they challenge their system? What new ways can they come up? And they're looking at more than just getting in through a door or window. They're looking at those sensitive times of shift change, startups in the morning where it's all chaotic, or when temps show up to a facility and there's like 4 or 5 people, going through the employee entrance door. These are all great examples when it comes to food defense that I've seen in the past, just working with companies. So that's my few minutes.
Okay, great. Well, we are out of time, so that will conclude our presentation today. We will be sharing links to the recorded session, but thank thank you all for joining us, and we hope you all have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.